Check. 1, 2, 3.
The D.
Brief.
Brief. This is the D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit.
Your guide to Detroit's arts
and entertainment scene.
This is the D
Brief.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your co-host. My name is Seth Ressler, and I have on the line stand-up comedian Brad Wenzel. He is one of ours. He is from Monroe, Michigan, but he actually lives out in Los Angeles. He made that big move a couple of years ago. He is coming back, though, to play Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle on May 30th, May 31st, and June 1st. Brad, thanks so much for taking the time.
Of course. Thanks for talking to me.
Oh, I love that you're coming home. You are one of the big success stories. You went out to L.A. You've been on television. You've been on Conan 3 times now, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
What is that experience like?
It's cool. It's I've been really lucky that they've been nice to me there and let me do the show a few times. It's the first time I did it, I was still in Michigan, so that was extra surreal. And then the second, the third time I was out in LA, and those were different because those were more short notice. So that was kind of a different experience also. But each time it's been fun, and everybody there is like so nice, and they've been doing that. You know, Conan's been on late night like 25 years, so everything's like a pretty well-oiled machine. And yeah, they're great at what they do and make you feel comfortable and everything.
Can you take us behind the scenes a little bit? Like, what time do you get there? Is there a green room? Do you hang out? Do you see Conan before the show? What happens?
Yeah, you get there really early. I feel like in my experience, I've probably been there almost earlier than necessary, but they tape it at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So then you get there like a few hours before that. I want to say like two or 3 hours before that, and they make sure like your clothes are okay, and you do a mic check, and they kind of ask you little details like what kind of mic do you want and stuff like that, and you get that all squared away. And then they're doing like Conan's doing like kind of like rehearsal and stuff still like leading up to the taping. So on in the green room and everywhere, they got like TV screens, and you can see them like kind of there used to be a desk, now there isn't, but they'd be like running, you know, getting things ready for the show still and stuff like that. So yeah, you hang around for couple hours, 2 or 3 hours before, I would say. And there's a green room and stuff, and that's neat, you know, just because, you know, it's a TV show green room, so it's cool because you can bring some friends back there with you and stuff. And my girlfriend's gone with me each time I've done it, and yeah, it's pretty neat.
What is the difference between performing on television and performing in a club like Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle?
Well, the thing with television is they're really excited, and they're rooting for you for sure. They're excited to be there. The difference is you're doing stand-up like out of context. So on a normal stand-up show, the audience comes in and they're cold, and then they watch the opening comedian, and they get more warmed up, and then they watch another comedian, and they get kind of in the momentum of a stand-up show, and they get used to hearing material and stuff, and it kind of, you know, builds on itself. Whereas when you do a late night set, you kind of just walk out, and they know you're going to do stand-up, and they're very on your side, but there isn't that unspoken momentum that you would have at a regular show. So I always say it's somehow easier and harder at the same time.
Nice. You've been doing this a long time. I mean, you started when you were 17. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I started in Michigan when I was technically still in high school the first few times I went up. And yeah, I've been doing it 8 years, 8.5 years.
How did you get started?
I did. My cousin Charlie and I were both stand-up fans, so we would talk about, you know, did you see this special and stuff like that. And then I had been writing jokes kind of privately, not knowing what my end game was. And then he said to me, like out of the blue, kind of like, "Hey, you're funny. If you give 5 minutes together, like I'll drive you to an open mic." Because I was 16 and he was like 6 years older than me, and still is. And it was like, okay. So I kept writing, and when I got 5 together, I went to an open mic in Ypsilanti. And I did that, and I kind of got the bug from that. I did 2 of those, and then I was young and pretty naive, so I didn't know how to get up at places if you were underage. So then that's kind of what led to me taking Bill Bouchard's comedy class at the Castle. So the Castle is actually the third place. My third set was there, and that's what I kind of consider like my starting date or my comedy anniversary, whatever you'd call that.
So that's your home club. What's it like to headline your home club? I mean, this will be the second time that you've done it. What is that experience like?
It's cool. The Castle's been, super good to me. I would technically say the Ann Arbor club's my home club only because I lived in Ann Arbor for a few years, so I was just there so much. But the Castle is like where one of the places I started, so it has that similar feeling of you go up for your first couple times there, having never done it, and then to headline it is very cool. And Mark's always been so supportive and good to me. So it's a cool feeling. You definitely feel like you want to do a good job and stuff, but. Yeah, it's familiar and it's cool. It's nice of them to let me do it and stuff.
You mentioned that you started listening to comedy at a young age. Who were some of the guys who it really influenced you? I mean, or were your favorites growing up?
Well, I loved all this is probably obvious, but I loved all the one-liner guys. So I loved Stephen Wright and Mitch Hedberg and Galifianakis and Dimitri and all those guys. And then I really liked Birbiglia, and I liked Steve Martin and Bob Newhart. I would kind of go all over the place and stuff. But yeah, when I think people my age kind of grew up on Comedy Central was just had stand up on like in the afternoon. So it wasn't uncommon to be a kid and be able to watch like people's half hours at like 3 p.m. When you were growing up. So I think people kind of grew up knowing or just being exposed to a little bit more stand up, and those were a lot of my favorites.
Yeah, you mentioned, and I'm sure you draw a lot of comparisons to guys like Stephen Wright and Mitch Hedberg because you do have that sort of clever, dry, one-liner style.
Yeah, the non-sequiturs, yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to, like Mike Birbiglia, who you mentioned, who's a little bit more of a storyteller. And so I've always wondered, where do you find the inspiration? Because you must have to write so many more jokes than the storytellers because you have to come up with, or, it's like a new one every single time. Where does that come from?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think they both have their own challenges. But you definitely have to write a lot, and you have to if I want to do 10 minutes of stuff, that's like 20 jokes for me. And for some other guys who do that style, that might mean more or less. But yeah, it takes a lot of writing, and it's the same as anything. It's just all trial and error. So it's just writing a lot and then keeping what works, and that's pretty much it. And then like storytellers, they have the advantage of if they have a new thing, it might be like a 15-minute thing. But on the flip side of it, they have to, because they're drawing so much from experience, they have to kind of wait and be at the mercy of something interesting happening. Whereas joke writers can kind of mine things for material, but you have to come up with maybe 80 ideas instead of like 6.
Right.
So it's and I think it chooses the comedian. I don't think you choose it. You just kind of go with what your strengths are. And
you made the big move out to Los Angeles. I mean, tell me how that's been. I mean, how's the LA scene different than the Michigan comedy scene?
It's good. It's obviously much bigger, but it's still just stand up. Ultimately, I think it's much easier if you were a new comedian. It's much easier to start in the Midwest because you can get up in front of audiences pretty easily. Whereas in Los Angeles, it's so competitive that you have professional comedians trying really hard to get up in front of next to no people a lot of the time. And there's great crowds too. It's just, getting in front of them is more difficult. So I would say the Midwest is in a better place to start. You have easy access to audiences. LA, there's more opportunities. I think the crowds might be a little bit more savvy in some cases, just because they might have just been exposed to more stand up. But yeah, it's at its core, it's not that different. It's actually reminded me going from Michigan to Los Angeles. It's a lot of like you're in your car for a half hour, 45 minutes, then you do your set, and then you're in the car again. So in that way, it feels similar to me. It would be more of a culture shock, I think, if you went to New York or Chicago.
Right. Right. A lot of Detroiters have actually made that move out there. The most recent that I can think of is Jeff Horst and Esther Navarez.
Yeah.
Both been on the podcast, been following their journey out west on Facebook.
Yeah.
Do you guys see each other? Do you see other Detroiters? Is there a community of Detroit comics out there?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I see. I live pretty close to Trevor Smith, who I started out with in Michigan, and he lives out here. And then that Jeff Horst and Esther are moved in with him. So I see Jeff all the time when I go over there. And then, you see, I see Ricardo Flanagan here and there. And you'd run to people all the time. Trevor and Harry Morose and Corbin Recchi are all Michigan guys, and they run a really popular show in downtown Los Angeles called Cranes at this bar that used to be Bank Vault. And so that's sort of a mini hub in a sense. And you see Michigan folks all the time. And I became closer with there were guys who were from classes ahead of me who I didn't know in Michigan, but then met when I moved to LA, and were always like very kind to me and stuff. So yeah, there's a little community for sure.
Oh, that's cool. Speaking of Detroit, you put out an album last year called Sweet Nothings.
I did,
and it was on Third Man Records, Jack White's record label. How did that happen?
I did a show. So Zach Martina, who's a Michigan comic, he would put on stand-up shows at the Cass Corridor, which is the Third Man, their Detroit venue. And so I got booked to headline a show there while I was home. And so I did that show, and I was in the right place at the right time, because I guess a few days prior to that, Jack White had been around, and they were talking about comedy with the guys who run the Detroit operation, and he was saying how he really liked one-liner comics, and he kind of missed that. And then a few days later, I did my show there, and it went really well. And I was already booked to record an album at the club in Madison, Wisconsin, but I didn't have a label or anything. So after the show, the guys at Third Man were like, "Man, that was great. Like, we should do something." And I was like, "Well, I'm looking for like a label right now." So it just all kind of came together, and right place, right time kind of thing.
And it's gotten a good reception from other comics, right? I mean, Amy Schumer, Patton Oswalt, or some of the people that have mentioned it on Twitter, I think.
Yeah, they were both very, very nice to do that and stuff, and were supportive of me like prior to that. So it was nice of them to like kind of shout out the album and help spread the word and stuff. They're both very, very kind people to do that.
The other thing that I love about it is that it came out on vinyl. So
Yeah.
and given that you do one-line comedy, I would love to see just like a DJ in a club go out and drop samples from your album in the mix.
Yeah. That's when I'll know I made it. If like a SoundCloud rapper, someone drops one of my jokes in their song, then I'll be in a new level.
Nice. Well, besides coming home for the Comedy Castle, what else are you working on at the moment? Any projects?
Yeah, I'm trying to turn over, new material, and so I'm always working on that, working on getting tapes together for late night, and working on turning over 45 to have just a new album or special or what have you. That's always kind of in the forefront. And then I've been working on this podcast with another comic from LA, Alexa Loftus, who's also a very funny joke writer, and we keep tweaking the format and stuff, but it's called We Wrote Jokes for This, and it's a podcast where we write like sort of topical jokes and tell them we have other comics on, and we've been doing it as a game, and we're still sort of figuring out the format, but it's fun, and it's fun to write the jokes for it. So that basically stuff like that I've been working on.
Oh, that's awesome. And are you getting back to Michigan often? Are you coming back any other times this summer?
Yeah, I come back. I come back like twice this month to do the castle, and then I go back to LA for a couple weeks, and then I'm coming back for a wedding, and then I think I'll be back in like August for some family stuff, and then I'm definitely going to be back in the fall for sure, and try to probably do a lot more shows. I always come back around Christmas time and do a lot of shows too. But yeah, the fall and the winter are really good for Midwest runs and doing a bunch of shows. So yeah, I want to get back. I always like coming back.
Nice. And for those of us who are still here in the Detroit area, any comics that you think should be on our radar that we should go check out?
Oh yeah, Blaine Hill's always very funny, and Brett Mercer, Laura Wachowski, Sam Rager. Yeah, there's a bunch of funny people there. There's a bunch of funny new comics too that I don't know super well, but like the local comics would probably be able to point you in the right direction. But when I came home at Christmas time, I was happy to see all the sort of new comics who had popped up since I had moved. Like I've been gone it'll be 3 years next month. So now like you see all the kind of new comics coming into their own and stuff. So yeah, there's a nice scene and a nice crop of people, and yeah, support local comedy,
Well, awesome. Well, Brad, thanks so much for taking the time. We're excited to have you back in town. Again, you're at Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle, May 30th, 31st, and June 1st. Like I said, you really are, and something that I have heard for several years now is you are held up in the comedy community as one of the success stories, one of the guys that people are really excited about from the Detroit area. So this is cool.
That means a lot. Thank you.
To see you. So thanks, Brad. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for talking to me.
The D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit's arts and entertainment scene.